A retreating column stretches for miles, and coalition officers are already watching every vehicle move. No coalition soldier is near this road, yet commanders thousands of miles away already know exactly where it ends. This is Kuwait, February 1991, the night an entire army tried to vanish and failed. Operation Desert Storm had spent weeks bombing Iraqi positions across occupied Kuwait since mid-January 1991. By late February, the ground offensive finally began, and Iraqi forces in Kuwait started collapsing fast. On February 26, Iraqi President Saddam Hussein ordered a full withdrawal of forces from Kuwait. Thousands of vehicles packed onto Highway 80, the main route north out of Kuwait City. The column included tanks, buses, looted cars, and soldiers fleeing alongside stolen goods from the occupation. Coalition reconnaissance satellites had been monitoring Iraqi troop movements across the theater for weeks already. Imagery satellites like the KH-11 could relay near real-time pictures of ground activity to analysts. E-8 JSTARS aircraft also tracked moving vehicles on the ground using powerful side-looking radar systems. This radar could detect a moving convoy through darkness, smoke, and the thick clouds of burning oil. On the night of February 26, sensors picked up an enormous convoy massing north of Kuwait City. Analysts realized this was not a tactical repositioning, it was a mass exit from the country. The convoy stretched for roughly 20 miles along Highway 80 toward the Iraqi border. Near the Mutla Ridge, the road narrowed and traffic bottlenecked into a slow-moving, exposed mass. Coalition commanders now faced a decision: let the column escape or strike it before it crossed the border. Imagery showed military hardware mixed throughout the column, not solely fleeing civilians as some assumed. That confirmation from overhead imagery cleared the way for coalition aircraft to attack the column. Navy and Air Force jets struck the lead and rear vehicles first, trapping the convoy in place. With no way forward and no way back, the column was locked onto that stretch of road. Over the following hours, coalition strike aircraft returned repeatedly to hit the stranded convoy. Many soldiers abandoned their vehicles and fled on foot into the surrounding desert to survive. By morning, the highway was littered with hundreds of destroyed and abandoned vehicles for miles. The scale of destruction along Highway 80 stunned journalists who reached the site days later. Television crews and photographers dubbed the scene the Highway of Death within days of the strikes. Images of the wreckage began circulating worldwide, raising uncomfortable questions about the scale of the attack. Some observers asked whether striking a retreating force still counted as a legitimate military target. Under the laws of armed conflict, a retreating force remains a lawful target if still armed and organized. Coalition commanders maintained the column carried functioning weapons and had not signaled any surrender. Reconnaissance imagery played a central role in that legal and moral justification after the fact. Analysts could show exactly what vehicles were present and precisely when the strikes occurred. This marked one of the first wars where overhead surveillance shaped both the battle and its public defense. Before satellites, commanders relied on scouts, spies, and delayed photo reconnaissance flown back for processing. In earlier wars, that kind of delay could mean intelligence was hours or even days old. By 1991, the Gulf War compressed that timeline from days down to mere minutes in many cases. The KH-11 satellite constellation used digital imaging sensors instead of film, enabling much faster transmission. Images could be downlinked to ground stations and relayed to commanders within a short window of capture. That speed transformed reconnaissance from a historical record into an active tool for real-time decisions. The E-8 JSTARS aircraft added a second, complementary layer of tracking that satellites alone could not provide. Satellites offered wide, overhead snapshots, while JSTARS radar tracked movement continuously across the battlefield. Together, these systems gave coalition planners a persistent, layered picture of Iraqi movements across the theater. That layered picture is exactly what let analysts confirm the Highway 80 convoy so quickly that night. Without that speed, the convoy likely would have crossed into Iraq before any strike could be organized. Highway 80 became a case study in how quickly modern surveillance could translate into decisive military action. Military schools have studied the event since, examining both its intelligence success and its ethical questions. The event also pushed military planners to write clearer rules about targeting retreating forces in future conflicts. By the war's end, Highway 80 stood as proof that space-based eyes had permanently changed the battlefield. The Highway of Death was not the only place this new surveillance web proved its worth that week. Across the entire Kuwaiti theater, similar convoys tried to flee north through other routes and back roads. Coalition sensors tracked several of these secondary columns, though none matched the scale of Highway 80. General Norman Schwarzkopf, the coalition commander, received these reports through a rapidly evolving intelligence chain. That chain ran from orbiting satellites through ground stations into command centers hundreds of miles from the front. Each link in that chain had to work quickly, since Iraqi forces were moving fastest under cover of darkness. Analysts at the National Photographic Interpretation Center reviewed satellite imagery around the clock during the ground war. Their job was to distinguish military vehicles from civilian trucks, tanks from buses, weapons from cargo. Getting that call wrong could mean striking fleeing civilians or letting armed units escape untouched. This pressure made the imagery review process one of the most consequential jobs of the entire war. The Gulf War also relied on a newer generation of imaging satellites beyond the original KH-11 design. These systems were developed through the 1970s and 1980s, largely to monitor Soviet military installations. By 1991, that Cold War infrastructure was repurposed almost overnight to track a desert ground war instead. Few planners in the 1970s imagined these tools would one day track a retreat across Kuwaiti sand. The JSTARS aircraft itself was still considered experimental, having only recently left developmental testing before the war. Only 2 JSTARS prototype aircraft were rushed into the theater directly from testing programs in the United States. Despite their unfinished status, both aircraft flew dozens of combat missions during the campaign's final weeks. Their radar operators worked in cramped stations aboard the aircraft, reading moving blips in real time. That data fed directly into strike planning, letting pilots target columns almost as soon as they moved. This was a striking departure from earlier conflicts, where pilots often searched visually for moving targets. In Vietnam and Korea, finding a moving convoy at night often depended on flares and luck. By 1991, radar and satellite data replaced much of that guesswork with a continuous digital picture. That shift did not eliminate uncertainty, but it dramatically shortened the time between detection and decision. Highway 80 became the clearest demonstration of just how short that new window had become. Beyond Highway 80, coalition planners began building a broader doctrine around sensor-to-shooter speed. They called this the kill chain, the sequence linking detection, decision, and strike into one continuous process. Before 1991, that chain often took hours. Over Highway 80, it collapsed to minutes in places. That compression became the model for what later planners would call network-centric warfare. The Gulf War is often cited as the first true demonstration of this integrated surveillance strike approach. Yet the technology behind it had been decades in the making, quietly developed far from any battlefield. The KH-11 program began under a classified project name, first launched in December 1976. For years, its very existence remained one of the United States government's most closely guarded secrets. By the late 1980s, improved versions of the satellite offered sharper resolution and faster data relay. That upgrade path meant the constellation available in 1991 was far more capable than its original design. Meanwhile, JSTARS traced its roots to a joint Army and Air Force program started in the late 1970s. Engineers designed it to track Soviet armored columns across the plains of Central Europe, not desert highways. When the Gulf crisis erupted in 1990, that Cold War system was redirected almost overnight to the Middle East. Ground crews and engineers scrambled to adapt software built for European terrain to desert and coastal conditions. This rapid adaptation reflected a broader pattern across the war, where new technology was tested under real combat pressure. Some historians now describe the 1991 Gulf War as the first true test bed for information-age combat. The lessons drawn from Highway 80 extended well beyond that single stretch of desert road. Military planners studied how imagery timing had directly influenced both the strike decision and its later defense. That precedent influenced how later conflicts documented targeting decisions for both operational and legal review. Within a decade, similar sensor networks would guide operations in the Balkans and later in Afghanistan. Each of those campaigns built on the same principle proven over Highway 80: see first, decide fast. Declassified reports later confirmed how closely imagery analysis and strike timing were coordinated that February night. Those records showed the entire detection-to-strike cycle on Highway 80 sometimes took less than an hour. For a conflict fought at the very start of the digital era, that speed was nothing short of remarkable. Highway 80 endures as the moment overhead surveillance stopped merely watching war and started deciding it. The technology born from Cold War secrecy found its first true test on a Kuwaiti desert road. Every satellite feed and battlefield sensor used today traces its lineage back to that single February night. If this true story of technology and war surprised you, subscribe for more real history, decoded and sourced.